Welcome to the Chairman's Perspective Podcast. Chairman.
And welcome to the Chairman's Perspective, powered by the Kazukian Network. Another outstanding episode coming for you today. My name is Lee Eric Smith. I'm joined by the chairman, Mr. Van Turner, the chairman of the Shelby County Commission. As always, glad to have you on the show.
It's good to be here with you.
It's going to be a great show. We've really got way too much show to pack into this time, but we're going to do the best we can. Not only is Chairman Turner with us today, but we're also joined by the Shelby County Assessor of Property, Mr. Melvin Burgess. We're going to be talking about Electrolux and pilots and what they did and what they didn't do. We're going to be talking about TIFFs and workforce development.
That's correct. And I think all this plays a part into what we're trying to do as a city and what we're trying to do as a county. We want to attract new companies into town. We want to attract new businesses into town, but we don't want to give away the farm, as they say. So we still want to make sure that we have some semblance of control over how we hand out these incentive packages to make sure that, again, we're not left in a bad situation if these companies decide to pull out.
See what I mean? It's a lot of show that we got to get to. Obviously, we've got the chairman's perspective plus a bonus perspective from the assessor of property right here in Shelby County. So don't go away. We'll be right back here on the chairman's perspective, powered by the Kazukian Network.
The Chairman's Perspective on the Kazukian Network.
Kazukian! I'm Cynthia Daniels, host of Grind Set. Are you looking to start a business? Do you need tips on how to scale up? Get it on Grind Set. On this show, our guests will keep you listening. What's your Grind Set? If you happen to miss some of our episodes, make sure you check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast provider.
Grind Set on the Kazukian Network.
Kazukian! The Chairman's Perspective on the Kazukian Network.
And we're back on the Chairman's Perspective, powered by the Kazukian Network. My name is Lee Eric Smith, and we have a special guest joining us today, none other than the Shelby County Assessor of Property, Mr. Melvin Burgess. Glad to have you in the studio with us today on the Chairman's Perspective.
It's good being in the studio. Thanks.
Excellent. And I'm really excited because we're going to get a chance to get a couple of different perspectives on things that we know are affecting people here in Shelby County. Like I said, we're going to talk about pilots, TDZs, TIFFs. But we're going to get some of the perspective from both, obviously, the chairman's perspective, but also as well as yours, Mr. Burgess. So let's dive right in and get into this Electrolux thing. Obviously, a lot of people are very upset about the fact that they were given some incentives to come here, and then all of a sudden they bail. A lot of people kind of want to know what's going to happen with that. Are they getting off scot-free? Who kicks us off here?
Well, I'll allow the assessor to kick us off. I think that everyone has seen the headlines. Electrolux took advantage of our payment in lieu of taxes program, which everyone knows them as pilots, and opposed to what they were supposed to do and stay for the long haul, they pulled out on us after about 4 or 5 years, and to the tune of about $40 million loss on this particular deal. And so now we're scrambling to put the pieces back together. And of course, our assessor, Assessor Burgess, is right there in the catbird seat. He's seeing everything that's taking place. And so it's just really interesting to see what he has to say. What do you think, Assessor?
I mean, you're right on point, Chairman. Of course, both we were both colleagues on the commission together. And of course, they pointed out in the paper that you and I voted for it. Mm-hmm. And we did vote for it because, anytime jobs are being, created, we're all for that. And like I said earlier, was that, we always wanted some kind of oversight when I was on the commission because, we wanted to see what they were doing, because whenever you talk about abating taxes, either a commissioner should be there because the county commission sets the tax rate, or someone from the assessor's office should be there so we'll know whatever building you're going in, we can get the heads up, we can go in, prior to them moving all their information in to get the square footage, to get all the information we need. It's easy to assess property on the front end than the back end, right? Mm-hmm. So when we found out that they were leaving, my team, we got together at the assessor's office and found out that they were on the roll incorrect. They were on the roll for $30 million and should have been on the roll that of what we assessed right at $84 million. So
Wow.
it was on the roll incorrect. It's just like when you go out and build a home. Who tells you when the home has been built that the home is on the property instead of us sending you a assessor bill just showing on the land. So for the most part, we got to do a better job, and everybody needs to be at the table, when these big deals are handed out, because everybody pay their fair share of taxes, and should no one be able to escape from that.
I want to roll back for just a second so that we can kind of educate people on how we got to where we are now. So we have this major corporation, Electrolux, who is looking around for places to expand their operations. The city of Shelby County comes up with a pilot to entice them to come to Memphis. And so finish this sentence for me, either one or both of you. We offer you, Electrolux, these tax incentives, and as a result of these tax incentives, you get what and we get what as the county.
I think in the deal it said that you're going to get 1,200 jobs. Okay. You're going to get, of course, you're going to get us some tax breaks, and I don't know what else was all in the contract, but what was attracted to me and as a commissioner was the jobs and just and uplifting our economy.
Right. We're looking for people to look. That's right. And we're not just talking about. I mean, obviously, we're talking about some wage hour jobs, but we're also talking about some salaried, maybe. That's
right. I think the salaries were supposed to be high salary jobs, but looking at the tail end of it, we found out that they only employed less than 400 to 300 of Memphians. And what that came from was that when they started doing the hiring, we had a lot of people here in Memphis that did not qualify because either it was the drug testing, their training, they couldn't get to work. It was all kind of issues of why, they couldn't get jobs. And we found out also that a lot of those jobs were being supported through a temp service. So what does that tell you? That they're not even getting any benefits. So, once again, there needs to be an accountability tool, doing that pilot, why are we are, give them that, that discount or whatever, however you want to call it, to make sure that they're carrying out what they say on that contract. And for the most part, they didn't carry that out because there was no oversight.
Yeah. And to sort of piggyback on what the assessor is saying, if you recall, 2008 was a horrible reception.
Oh, yeah.
For, the economy. And so essentially Memphis wanted a big win. Shelby County wanted a big win. If you could put your minds back to 2008, 2009, 2010, we were digging out of the hole. And so Electrolux comes and presents this opportunity, and we wanted to make sure to keep Electrolux here, attract them here, make sure they didn't go down to Soto County or elsewhere. And so these incentives were offered to them. And the predecessor for EDGE is what was called the IDB, the Industrial Revenue Board. And essentially, that was the entity which presented this package, and essentially Electrolux took it. And so that was sort of the basis of how we got here.
And people it can be very easy to forget where not just, Shelby County, but the whole nation was coming out of that recession right in the middle of it. I mean, everybody, we talk about it now, how close the country came to a full-on depression. And so I'm just curious as to whether or not in hindsight, because the city and the whole country was in a state of desperation, whether or not, if you had to do it over again, were we arguing or asking for things from a position of strength or weakness? Did we give up too much to try to have that win, do you think?
When I took office in September, the assessor's office, the first thing I looked at were the pilots. So what we did was we came up with an aggregate report, and I presented that report to Chairman Turner and to both mayors, basically outlining all the pilots from every municipality, from Germantown, Lakeland, who all had pilots, to Memphis. And I told them in the report that we are not over-piloted, meaning that we're not just giving up the shop. I mean, we're in line. We're not over-piloted.
Right.
So I think the deal, was a good deal. And at that time, but when you go back and look at it, you ask yourself the question, was it a good deal? I mean, I'm on the assessor side of it as far as, it was omitted, as far as putting on the tax roll because we did lose dollars on that way. But, we're not overpiloted. And I think if you want to be an aggressive city, you want to try to create jobs. It's all about creating jobs, because, we have a big issue with poverty here. Mm-hmm. However, in that contract, it could have been some stipulations where it could have been some training, some job training, because we know our workforce is not the best it could be. So, our thing would be is, how come it could have been some training classes or, anything that could really help out to try to stimulate, the number of employees that, that they should have hired.
And you're listening to the Chairman's Perspective, powered by the Kadzukian Network. Chairman, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think this is great commentary. I appreciate the assessor getting on board and really addressing this issue head on. He didn't do what he could have done and stuck his head in the sand, but he didn't shy away from this issue. And this is an issue of concern. I mean, we don't want to sell ourselves short. Memphis is a great city with great people. We have a lot to offer, and we don't want to sell ourselves short in the attempt of bringing folks in here who are not committed to the vision and what we want as a city and as a county. And so I do think that we should be discussing this issue from the standpoint that we don't ever want another Electrolux to happen again in our great city and county. And there are a lot of parameters which are in place now with the newly created EDGE board, which is what is in place now to prevent these kinds of things. There are clawback provisions. If companies don't stay, as long as they say they're going to stay, we can go and get some money back. If they don't give us the jobs that they say they're going to give us, we can take years back from the pilot program. If they don't hire the ex-offenders that they said that they were going to hire, we can take certain incentives that we have given to them back. And if they don't support minority and women-owned businesses, we can also claw back the years and take away some of the incentives that we've afforded these companies. And, that's really important to us. There's no way in the world anyone listening to this podcast should be satisfied with the numbers as stated. Majority African-American city, majority African-American county, and the number of projects and the amount of money going to black-owned and women-owned businesses is dismal. And so we have to make sure that when we are asking businesses to come into this city and this county, they understand that they have to support the people who are paying the taxes. We're basically giving them a tax break. Mm-hmm. And the majority of the people paying taxes are African American. And so it stands to reason that if you're receiving these incentives and if you're receiving these breaks, you need to support the majority of the people in this community. And we're not going to let up off that issue. We're going to stay on that issue because that's what it's going to take to really push this city and county forward. I have a cousin who's visiting with me, and she's away in school, and we want her to come back to Memphis and to Shelby County. We should be sick and tired of sending our youngest and brightest and most talented people away for school, and they don't come back home. We need all their energy. We need their talent. We need that insight. We need that vision back here home, at their home in Memphis and Shelby County, making it better. Let's make Memphis rival what these other places are doing.
And, to add to what Chairman Turner was saying is that, and also the downside is going to be is, people that look like us around here at this table are going to lose their jobs. And when a job is lost in a family, it's a great impact because it impacts the whole household. It impacts the kids. it impacts your economic responsibilities, and it's detrimental. So now I think the Mayor Strickland.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but you're saying when Electrolux leaves, people are going to lose their jobs.
They're going to lose their jobs.
And
right
the bigger impact of that.
That's right. It's a great impact. And I think Mayor Strickland's trying to put a package together to where these people, I guess, could be hired, but, I don't know how successful that would be. But at the end of the day, these are kids, who will be coming from homes who, parents have lost their jobs, and, it's detrimental, to our community and to African Americans, not having a job here in this city in times like these.
Absolutely. I wanted to come back to something you had brought up earlier, Mr. Burgess. That is, we talked about Electrolux using temp agencies to staff the plant here. And because those are temp agencies, a lot of those people don't have benefits. The question is, can Memphis build the economy of the future with a significant portion of its workers working on temp jobs, or do they have to be hired by, the corporation improper?
Well, the reason corporations go to temp services is because the workforce. Shelby County's workforce is not what it should be. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. I mean, the workforce, we got a good school system, but I think, we need to work closely with these companies coming in here, need to work closely, with all our school systems, not just, with private schools, city schools, parochial schools, these schools that are, out east, and figure out, what technology that they're going to be bringing here so our kids can be ready to apply for those jobs. The workforce is not as best here in Shelby County. And that's why they go to temp service, because they just can't find the people to do the work as far as the technology side of it. So that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have a better workforce. Matter of fact, I was talking to the newly appointed superintendent, talking about about identifying a workforce here. So when jobs come here, or like Electrolux, you got a pool that you can pull from, like Mr. Turner said, his cousins here that goes to Tennessee State. Maybe she could have been in that pool, maybe as an engineer or whatever the case may be. But the jobs that our folks were given down Electrolux, they were just $30,000 a year jobs, $29,000 a year jobs, and that's all right salary, but that's not a high salary, for an average family with a household.
Right. And we talk a lot about workforce development here in the Mid-South and in the greater Memphis area, but that's a riddle that, is a tough one to crack. I do want to get the chairman's perspective on that, but we do have to go to break first. You're listening to the chairman's perspective on the Kadzukian Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The chairman's perspective on the Kadzukian Network.
Riffin' on jazz.
When two friends get together to kick it
about jazz, it's called Riffin' on Jazz.
Catch us riffing on jazz every week right here on your favorite broadcast or podcast platforms.
Riffin' on jazz on the Kadzukian Network. Kadzukian!
The chairman's perspective on the Kadzukian Network.
And we're back on the chairman's perspective, powered by the Kadzukian Network. I am Lee Eric Smith, joined by Chairman Van Turner Jr., as well as the Assessor of Property, Mr. Melvin Burgess. We're going to pick right back up where we left off. We were talking about workforce development, about why temp companies tend to boom when these big companies come to town. Chairman, I know you had something that you wanted to add on that before we went to break. But I'm also just curious about, we talk about workforce development and getting people ready for the jobs that are coming. I'm just curious how wide that gap is and how either one of you think we get to bridge that.
Well, I think it's something that we all know is an issue. Hence, you're seeing high schools move back towards trade. And I think that's important. When I was at Whitehaven, you had the various trades taught there in school. So a student graduating high school could go right into a career, and it would be a good paying career. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a recognition that, there has to be improvement with linking vocational programs with these jobs, which are ready, willing, and able to hire them. And there's necessarily no need to go to a 4-year institution right off. You got time. In some instances, these companies will pay for you to go and get that 4-year degree once you begin work. And I also want to mention the reason that these temp agencies are also an issue is that it's all about the profit margin. If they can take these hours back, terminate these employees, really don't have to pay benefits, and can pretty much control them as needed, that helps the bottom line of the company. The widgets did not sell as well this week, so we'll just cut back, these temp employees.
Right.
And you just can't necessarily do that.
Because the temp employees work for the temp company, which was hired by the big corporation.
Absolutely. So, so you see that as an issue too.
Yeah. And, we often forget, it can be lost. And, people ain't talking about this enough, if you ask me, when we talk about today's job market, is that you're not just competing against other cities or even against other people for the jobs. It's automation and all of that is starting to affect these types of jobs. So that's something that we've got to keep in mind as well.
Absolutely. We were just looking through my oldest child's schedule. He's at a school which has a STEM program, science, technology, engineering, and math. And one of the courses offered was coding. Mm-hmm. And I just think back to when I was in school in the 90s, unheard of.
Right.
And so this is actually where we are now. He loves to play Fortnite. And so our point to him was learn how Fortnite was created. These are the tech jobs of the future. And so we definitely have to emphasize where the careers, the jobs, and opportunities will be 5, 10, 15 years from now. And so I think that's absolutely important. And if we're asking for these companies to come into town, we have to have a good workforce, an able workforce, a company workforce, which is able to take advantage of the jobs which are offered.
Exactly. So we spent a lot of time talking about a pilot that did not work. The Electrolux situation. Now they backed out of it. It was a good situation for them, arguably, but they pulled out of it. But I wanted to just shift gears. So when the electorate, when the taxpayers hear conversation of pilots, what does a good working pilot look like? When this type of payment in lieu of taxes is set up and it's successful, and feel free to quote examples if you can think of one, but even if not, what should taxpayers be looking for and say, hey, that's a good pilot, and we think that that's going to work for us? You
just made a comment that kind of caught my ear. I think you said if it was a good pilot or not. Well, this Electrolux pilot, on the surface, we might see some weakness they're pulling out, but as far as the economic stimulation, we don't have those numbers. Okay. You see what I'm saying? So on the, like how many jobs? How many jobs did they really fill? What was the economic, growth, or what was the numbers? And that's the numbers I don't have. So it's really hard for me to say that, of course we lost because they're pulling out. They didn't stick with the whole agreement. So, you can always say that. But
so if they stick with the whole agreement, assuming that the agreement was negotiated properly in the first place.
Exactly. It would have been a lot, of course, been a lot better. But still, I'm still, like I said earlier, we're not overpowdered, and I'm for sure that the economic, impact, it was an impact to a certain degree, but we didn't get the full impact out of it because they broke their contract. But nevertheless, like I said earlier, when I was on the county commission, we always talked about having some kind of accountability tool or have someone at the table, to make sure that these pilots are properly signed off, they're properly documented, and and taxpayers should know, who are getting the breaks and what the stipulations are and how do we hold them accountable, because obviously we don't want nobody to hold accountable on this last Electrolux deal, and we have to do that. People want to know. When we send those assessment bills out, I send them to trustee, everybody have to pay their fair share. It's true that everybody should be paying their fair share of property tax. Unfortunately, that's the only revenue that's realized that the county runs on is property taxes.
I want to shift gears just a second because we talked some at the beginning of the show. We tipped people off that we were going to talk some about TIFFs, about TDZs. Chairman, you and I have talked about that on this program before, but I wanted to get a little additional perspective from the assessor. When people hear about TIFFs. First of all, from where you're sitting in your position, can you kind of explain to our listeners what a TIFF is, what a TDZ is, and then what we should be looking for in those circumstances?
Well, the TDZ, that's the Tourist Development Zone.
Correct.
And I'm sure you can see some of that happening over there, right, where the school board is, over there by, you got the Children's Museum, you have the Memorial Stadium. So it's a good thing because what it's going to do is going to bring smart growth. And of course, anything that, we like to see is we like to see smart growth so we can put them on a tax roll. Right. So that's a smart thing. And of course, the property values over that way are already, they're right aligned because you got Chickasaw Garden and then the good job they're doing with that new STEM school over at East High School, which the chairman just talked about over at from Maxine Smith, because Maxine Smith School is going to be the feeder for the East STEM school. So it's all sitting in that economic, growth, that area right there. So when kids come from out of town, they have a track field there. They have maybe indoor basketball, whatever the case might be, already in that tourist zone. So that's what the expectations are for that tourist development zone, right in that area right there. So I think the property values over there are already good. It's just going to enhance the area, when tourists come, if they run a track, AAU basketball, AAU, whatever sport it is. Now, as far as the TIFF goes, I was part of it of getting that TIFF approved. If you go over and look at the new Binghamton, over there where the new Save-A-Lot, you have, the grocery stores. Now, the only concern that we had when it came to the TIFF was that, we didn't want that area we want the area to grow, but we got to be careful that we do not push those people out of there who've been over there for years. Mm-hmm. You got people been over there for a long time, and they're concerned because when I spoke with Noah Gray, who's over the CDC for Binghamton, he said that there's a lot of concern that people know that when, of course, you see those apartments right now that are being that were fenced off, and they're trying to find. I think they sent out a RFQ. So RFQ out to trying to get investors to come in and build those up. So, and if you go through Binghamton, you'll see a change. You see the diversity. Mm-hmm. However, we got people who've been in Binghamton that look like us who are concerned about their property value. So my office has already reached out to Noah Gray, to ensure that that they are aware of and their people in those neighborhoods are aware of what could possibly happen, which I hate. I hope it won't happen.
And you're listening to The Chairman's Perspective, powered by the Kadzukian Network. Both of you have been on the county commission for a while in various roles. Why don't we get the big manufacturers? Is Memphis and Shelby County just, in that regard, not job ready? What does your experience in past and current roles kind of teach you about that?
Well, you have a lot of issues. You have education, you have crime, and you have, I think, leadership. And so essentially, I think that we've turned the corner as far as leadership is concerned. When you look to both the council and to the commission and to both branches of government, City of Memphis and Shelby County, I think we are headed in the right direction. As I've stated before, we had an historic election this past August, which yielded the elections of our great assessor, who's here with us now, Burgess, as well as constitutional officers countywide. And so I think that really bodes well for what we are saying as a city and what we're saying as a county, because we are investing in the people who are within this community. I think with progressive leadership, Mayor Lee Harris and others at the helm, we now have leadership which really, I think, identifies with the more progressive movement that's happening, throughout the nation, but definitely here locally. And it is more attractive for, again, young people to move into a city where they see leadership and activism and movement, which reflects, where they're coming from. Because in college and in these institutions and in these universities, you're pushed by innovative thought, by creativity, by cutting edge theories. And so you want to have something which really, reflects that in your leadership and in what you have going on as a city. This is something that you've seen happen over time with the bike lanes, with the various emphasis on making the city of Memphis and Shelby County more livable, where you can walk, of course, throughout the community, ride your bikes, but you can work, live, and play. So I think all of that bodes well for what we have to do to attract, again, these huge manufacturing companies into our city and into our county. And it's just something that we're emphasizing now, but we have to bet on Memphis. We have to believe in ourselves. I was just with our executive director, and we just heard a presentation by Epicenter. And Epicenter is asking for Memphians and Shelby Countyans to bet on Memphis, to bet on this county, to invest in what we're doing, to invest in entrepreneurs who are here in this city. And then we have to do it. If we don't have faith in ourselves, then who will have faith in us? And so, I'm tired of looking at these other places. We can be what we want to be if we focus in on it, and if we support the leadership that's willing to make bold steps to make it happen. And just because we hadn't done things a certain way 5 or 10 years ago doesn't mean we can't do it now. And that's what we're going to have to do. That's absolutely what we're going to have to do if we're going to attract these major companies into town, and if we are going to move the city and county forward, and if we are going to be what we would like to be 5, 10, or 15 years from now.
I'm going to kind of add to what the chairman was saying, which I totally agree. And the other piece I'm going to spin on it is this. I had a chance, since this Electrolux thing, I've been invited to all of these different groups who abate taxes, and the Downtown Commission is one of them. And I told the Downtown Commission, they went over all their powers, what they're doing downtown. And this is what I told them in that meeting. I had a chance to grow up in Denver, Colorado. And in Denver, what they did was, they gave all of their different, like East Memphis, South Memphis, Orange Mound. I told them this. I said, downtown would not grow until we invest into around the surrounding communities. I'm always one. I was one of them persons I always say that money should be dished out based upon your zip code. That's how it should be dished out. And I feel that, we as politicians, because I was on the county commission, I felt I wasted a lot of time on, I ain't gonna say infighting politics to where, we really couldn't grow an area that I would like to see grow. When the chairman and I had a chance to go down to Prince George, we saw an area just like Lemoyne. I mean, it looks just like a section of Germantown. So how come we as officials now, who we all look all like here at this table, we don't have a strategic plan to move our communities? And I went to a CDC over in Orange Mound. People want to live in their communities, but guess what? I mean, what plan do we have to move them? What plan do we have? What plan do we have to move these communities? And right now, we need to get together and have a plan. And we really need a plan to grow these communities.
You're listening to the Chairman's Perspective, powered by the Kazukian Network. We're running close on time, but I got a couple more things I want to get to. One of them being, we hear a lot about the increase of millennials in our community, their increasing influence. Does that say that our community is now competing with like the Atlantas, the Charlottes, the places that are kind of magnets for this young up and coming working body?
Yeah, I mean, we all know the story of Atlanta. It started with Maynard Jackson, the first black elected mayor of Atlanta, and he put forth a plan to where there would be successive leadership, and that there would be a strategy or a plan to make Atlanta better, but to also include black people. Mm-hmm. To also include black people. Is the city too busy to hate? Right?
That's what they say.
And the color was green. It wasn't black or white. Mm-hmm. So you see that through Andy Young. You see that through Shirley Franklin. You see that through all the mayors who have now Keisha Lance Bottom, before her Kasim Reed. All these mayors kept that strategy going as far as making Atlanta an attractive city to bring in young people to really capitalize upon the new ideas. There's no way Atlanta should beat Memphis with music, all the musicians that make Atlanta came from Memphis.
Man.
I mean, just look at that.
I mean,
Jazzy, Fat. I can't name all these young folks, but they out there.
Mm-hmm.
The Memphis sound, our beats, our soul, stacks, what they sample, Al Green, the Barcades. I mean, all that is right down in South Memphis.
Right.
Yet, Atlanta is where it is because in some part, you got all these great hip-hop artists which are doing their thing, but they're really taken from what we created. We should have that right here in Memphis. And so as you see these things, we have to welcome the talent back into town. We have to nourish, and we have to promote it, and we have to support it. And we also have to have the leadership which understands that, we as black people, we got to get it together. We can't have a convention every time we have an election. That ain't going to happen anymore. We can't do that anymore. What we have to do is we have to decide among ourselves how we want to promote this city and to have this city progress. And we as leaders have to come together and work this out among ourselves. Although I appreciate the whole thought process of trying to focus in and unite behind, leaders who we can all agree to unite behind and have a consensus support behind. But that's going to take work. It's going to take reaching out to those who are in the community and have them buy in to where we want to go. So, I think that's something that could happen. But if you see Atlanta, that's how we've gotten to. That's where Atlanta got to where it was. And on the projects which made a difference, they made sure that there was 35% African-American participation in those deals. Mm-hmm. And so that's critically important. And that's on Assessor Burgess. That's on the commission. That's on all the folks who are in leadership now. And Assessor Burgess is shaking his head. Maybe he agrees with me.
I agree.
An excellent conversation. It's too much good stuff and not enough showtime. So we got to wrap it up. I want to thank again Chairman Turner and
thank you.
And Mr. Burgess for joining us today. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this on The Chairman's Perspective, powered by the Kazukian Network.
R&R on Sports is proud to be on Sirius XM.
So what's R&R stand for?
Real talk and relevant sports issues.
It's racial and relative. We're brothers from the South. We can relate.
R&R on Sports on the Kazukian Network.
Man, I really enjoyed the show. I think having Assessor Burgess here was really wonderful. He really gave us a good new perspective on this whole issue involving Electrolux. I think we're headed in the right direction because I think he's going to do and continue to do a great job as the assessor. Hopefully our listeners understand the Electrolux deal a lot better, and hopefully they know that going forward, we're going to put in place, or there are things in place now to prevent that situation from happening again.
It was great just to have a different, perspective. Obviously, we're always grateful to have you share your insights, but to have some of these issues talked about from a different angle, from a different perspective from somebody who deals with these issues every single day is critical. And I agree. I mean, we got a lot of work to do when it comes to making sure that our workforce is ready for not just the jobs that we have here, but the ones that we want to come. So like I told everybody at the top of the show, it was a whole lot of show. We had a 40-pound show that we had to fit in a 10-pound bag. And I think we did a decent job of it.
Yeah, I agree. And this won't be the last time. We look forward to inviting other constitutional officers here, the mayor, the sheriff, and whomever we need here to explain county government. And this is to provide our listeners with an issue, with a forum to understand what's going on with county government, because we know they can't make all the meetings. We thank you for listening to The Chairman's Perspective, powered by Kazukian, and we'll see you on the next show.
The Chairman's Perspective podcast, hosted by Lee Eric Smith, directed, produced, recorded, and distributed by Kazukian.